I think they requested the brothers to please come up so that brothers that are in that hall can make their way in. If you can kindly just move in, especially from this side, as closely as possible. Jazakumullah khair. And brothers in that hall, make your way inside. There's still plenty of room. Make your way inside. Allah. Alhamdulillah. Nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi. ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. قال الله عز وجل يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله ومن يفعل ذلك فأولئك هم الخاسرون. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى وما أموالكم ولا أولادكم بالتي تقربكم عندنا زلفى. وقال الله عز وجل إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة والله عنده أجر عظيم. يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى ولا تجعل يدك مغلولة إلى عنقك ولا تبسطها كل البسط. صدق الله العظيم. Honorable Ulama Ikram, respected brothers and sisters, I really should not be speaking in the presence of senior ulama, those who are very close and affiliated to my own elders. It's rather an awkward situation for me to have to speak. And it's a problem in general that we are speaking so much, unaware that every word is being documented and written, unaware that the speaker is going to have to give an account of every speech that he has given. And on the Day of Judgment, that speech is going to be presented to the speaker, and he is going to be asked about his intention for speaking on that occasion. And then he will be held to task for every single word that he said. Did he convey the amana? Did he not convey the amana? And during the course of his talk, did he maintain his sincerity, or did his sincerity become tainted? There are different levels of speech. There is speech which is completely harmful, absolutely harmful. Then there is that which is absolutely beneficial. And then there is that which has both elements. And the element of harm is more. And that which has both elements and the element of benefit is more. And that in which the element of harm and benefit is balanced. Any type of speech in which there is an element of harm, whether it's in the form of backbiting, in the form of lying, in the form of making a false promise, in the form of insulting someone, in the form of uttering something that is displeasing to Allah and His Rasul, all of that speech needs to be avoided and shunned. You're left with that one type of speech, that 20%, which is khair. It's purely beneficial. But there also shaitan traps the human being by affecting his intention and affecting the authenticity, making him waver. Speech is in general a very big problem. In fact, the only people that should be speaking, not people like myself, the only people that should be allowed to speak and convey the message of deen to the masses are those who have spent their lives purifying and cleansing themselves. Tamim al-Dari radiallahu anhu requested Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu permission to give a speech before Jum'ah. In the time of Sahaba, you had the khutbah of Jum'ah, then you had a speech before Jum'ah. This was the established way. People were pushing Tamim Dari radiallahu anhu to speak. He said, Amir al-Mu'mineen, this taqaza, this request keeps coming. He said, no, just leave it, just leave it, just leave it. Then on some occasion, people really pushed Tamim radiallahu anhu, and he started giving this lecture on Jum'ah. Umar radiallahu anhu said that I heard you started giving a talk. He said, yes, these people are requesting me, pushing me. He said, they have destroyed you. They have finished you. Because they put you in a position of extreme, stringent account and accountability in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Actually, the majalis of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were not majalis of speeches. They were majalis of sahbah. And his personality alayhi salatu wasalam was so powerful that anyone who sat in his company would be touched. A light would be lit inside. And after the passing away of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba who had acquired all of this nur and this light in the form of ilm and ma'rifah and nearness to Allah and taqwa and khashya and all of these beautiful things, then people used to come and sit in their company and gain it. And those people acquired a great deal. And then people used to come and sit in their gatherings. People used to go to sit with Ahnaf ibn Qais, who is a tabi'i. He accepted Islam in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ sent a group of people to his area, and his town, his village, they rejected the message. He came forth, he was just a child. And he said, I accept this message. I testify to the oneness of Allah and to the prophethood of Rasulullah ﷺ. When he did this, others got encouraged and the rest of his tribe started accepting Islam. But he was so young that he could not go with them to officially, formally accept Islam at the hands of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was a small boy, could not leave his house. But the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him, Allah maghfir lil ahnaf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him with amazing qualities, and his most outstanding quality was his tolerance, his forbearance. He would never get mad, his hilm. So people used to send their children to him to learn what hilm, what tolerance is. How to tolerate difficult circumstances, uncomfortable circumstances, how not to lose your cool, to maintain your composure. So people used to go to these akabir of the ummah to learn sifat and to learn qualities, and they would bring these qualities and then share them with others. And like this is how deen spread. It didn't spread from the speeches and from the rhetoric of deen. And today is a time where we are relying almost entirely on speeches and talks. There's no element of suhbah. Going to people that are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify ourselves and cleanse ourselves. There was one great Shaykh, Maulana Muhammad Zakaria Sahib rahimahullah. He used to have a gathering in which he used to teach people to stay quiet. He had this aversion against just talking. In fact, when people used to come to do i'tikaf with him, he would say, I just have one rule. I have no limitation, no restrictions on how much you sleep, how much you eat in your time of suhoor and iftar. I don't care. Only one restriction. Don't sit in gatherings and chat. This destroys you. It wastes all your a'mal. This is my only restriction. So every day after Asr, he would have a majlis that people started calling it the majlis of chup. What do? Nothing. You just sit there. Just do your dhikr quietly. Learn to restrain your tongue. He was teaching people how to restrain their tongue. And some people said that, Hazrat, everyone is there, they're sitting there, they're quiet. Why don't you speak at that time? Why don't you say something? He used to say something very strange. He used to say, जिनको हमारे चुप से फायदा नहीं होता, उनको हमारी बातों से भी फायदा नहीं हो सकता. Those that cannot benefit from my silence can also not benefit from my words. It's about suhbah. One very great shaykh who passed away recently, when I had just joined madrasa, we were honored by him visiting us in Canada. Hazrat Maulana Hakim Akhtar Sahib, rahmatullahi alayhi. He came in the company of another very great Shaykh, Mufti Rashid Ahmad Sahib Ludhianvi, rahmatullahi alayhi. Both of these shuyukh came together the same day, and in the same majlis we got to benefit. And all they spoke about was the importance of suhbah. And they said that through suhbah, things become valuable, things become precious. Sahaba became precious because of their suhbah. We call them sahaba. We don't call them sami'een of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We don't call them julasa of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We use the word suhbah, company. Mufti Rashid Ahmad Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi, he gave an example. He said, in this journey of mine, in my Quran, I didn't have my usual bookmark, so I took a little piece of paper and I inserted it to keep track of my recitation. And he says, it was many days now, I found my bookmark. But I have an attachment now to that little piece of paper that I've been using. I'm not sure what to do with it. I can't dispose of it. It has spent so much time in the company of this mushaf, it has also become important. I feel like it's a part of my mushaf. I don't want to throw it away. Things become valuable because of what they're affiliated with, what they're close with. And Maulana Hakim Akhtar Sahib rahmatullahi, he said these couplets. I've heard them recited in different versions, but I'll tell you with the words that he said on that day. He said, "Unse milne ki hai faqat yahi ikrah, milne walon se rah qaim kar." The only way to meet him is to meet those who meet him. Yani, to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, find those who are close to Allah, you'll get there as well. You'll understand. Our majalis are no longer majalis of suhbah, they're majalis of just talking. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. I am saying all of this because the topic of today was wealth. And in order to understand wealth, you have to step away from it. You cannot understand the haqiqah, the reality of wealth, while being immersed, engaged, and impressed by it. You have to distance yourself from it, step back, and then look at it, and you will understand what it is. And in order to understand wealth, the reality of wealth, you have to first understand the reality of this dunya and the reality of akhirah. To try to understand wealth in any other context would be nothing but deception. Because while you're engaged in it, earning it, spending it, you're involved in it. It's nothing but beauty. It's nothing but enjoyment. You see your needs being fulfilled, your desires being fulfilled. You see your dreams being fulfilled, your goals, your wishes. So you need to step back. And you need to create in yourself the understanding of, wait a minute, this wealth is something of this dunya. So let's first understand what dunya is. Wealth is something of dunya. And until you make that correlation, that this is from the things of dunya, and dunya has been given a certain profile in Quran and in Hadith. There is a difference between the rule and the exception. There is a rule, and sometimes there's an exception. The teacher makes a rule, nobody can use the bathroom in my class. This is the general rule. A student comes to class with a very bad stomach. He's having the runs. He requests his teacher, please, I've been having diarrhea since yesterday, can I go? Yes, you can go. This is the exception. It's not the rule. The rule is nobody can go. Similarly, there are rules about dunya and akhirah, and there are exceptions. So the rule about dunya is that this is not something very, very great. Dunya has not been glorified in Quran or in Hadith. We have been repeatedly told to be wary of it. We have been repeatedly told to be very diligent about it, to keep it at an arm's length, to not allow it to permeate into us, to not allow its love to enter our hearts, because its love, we were told, was the root of every khati'ah, of every mistake. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us, لَا الْفَقْرَ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ. It's not poverty, it's not fear of poverty about you that bothers me. وَلَكِنْ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ أَن تُبْسَطَ عَلَيْكُمُ الدُّنْيَا كَمَا بُسِطَتْ عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ فَتَنَافَسُوهَا كَمَا تَنَافَسُوهَا فَتُهْلِكَكُمْ كَمَا أَهْلَكَتْهُمْ. My worry is not a lack of wealth, a depletion of wealth. My worry about you is an excess of wealth. That wealth will be opened up to you like it was opened up to the people before you, and then you make it one of your objectives. You start competing. You start competing in wealth-based endeavors, just like the people before you did. And in that competition, you will find how this dunya will destroy you. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ. Your spirit of competition against one another to have more than the next guy, this has made you completely oblivious of your Creator, of your ultimate destination, of your objective. It has made you oblivious to so many things, so many facts and realities. And in chasing after it, you lose sight of time. You lose sight of how quickly life is passing by. The next thing you know, it's time to go. And all you have is what stays here. You don't have anything to take with you because you didn't give it that time that it deserved. So wealth is an element of dunya, and the general rule for dunya is that it needs to be kept at an arm's length. And that the heart should not be allowed to be attached to it. And that a person should never allow it to distract him or her from the remembrance of Allah. Sometimes I wonder about this ayat, and I think, what are we going to do? What answer are we going to give about this ayat on the Day of Judgment? لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله. Don't let it distract you from the remembrance of Allah. Ya Allah, what a challenge. And here we are in a constant state of distraction. We are constantly being distracted. And there Allah is saying, if you allow it to distract you, you will be a loser. You're going to lose out big time. So what do you do about something that you're not supposed to be distracted by, something that incurs losses on you, even though we look at wealth and children as gains? Allah says, I'm giving them to you, you have them, but don't let them distract you from my remembrance, otherwise you're going to be a loser. Now, once you understand the general rule about wealth, it's something distracting. Inna dunya hulwatun khadira. It is very attractive. It is very appealing. And it can be the source of many, many evils. It is one of the leading causes of kibr, pride and arrogance. It is one of the leading causes of sin. It is one of the leading causes of negligence towards humanity. It is a leading cause of so many spiritual and social ills. There are many people out there who are sinning just because they can, because they have the means. The exception is that this wealth, when it is used, when it is acquired from channels that please Allah, it is kept in a way that pleases Allah, it is disbursed and spent in a way that pleases Allah, then about such wealth, Nabi ﷺ says, نِعْمَ الْمَالُ صَالِحٌ لِلرَّجُلِ الصَّالِحِ. Good halal wealth, soundly earned wealth, is good for a sound man, for a pious man. And it is such type of wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to as khayr in the Quran. إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Allah calls it khayr. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deems it as a source of getting close to Him. وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ. Spend from what we have given you, before that day comes in which there is no expenditure. And spending in the path of Allah has been deemed as one of the most virtuous acts. And spending on the poor and the underprivileged, and spending on the family members, and spending and spending and spending. So we find that wealth has some good applications as well. So first learn the rule. The rule is that this is not necessarily something healthy. This is never to become the objective of life. The moment it becomes my objective, I have failed. And it is not to become a distraction from Allah. The moment it becomes a distraction, I have failed. And you know what? Every day we're passing and failing. And every day we pass and fail multiple times. In one day. In the span of one day. Because there are moments where we're able to detach and engage with Allah. Then there are moments where we're completely engrossed in dunya. Some of us are able to come back quicker. Some of us it takes us longer. So every day we're passing and failing. Ayyul kasbi atyab. Somebody comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, O Prophet of Allah, what type of earnings are the purest? A Sahabi is coming with the admission that I'm going to need some wealth to survive. Not too many ways around that. I'm going to have to acquire it. So, O Prophet of Allah, tell me, what are the best, the most purest ways of acquisition? So the Prophet ﷺ tells him two things. عَمَلُ الرَّجُلِ بِيَدِهِ وَكُلُّ بَيْعٍ مَبْرُورٍ. Two things. Go and do some work with your own hands and take a wage, a salary, a compensation for the work you have done. just for the work you've done. Take a profession, take a trade, provide a service, no matter what it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the human being very unique in the sense that we have more ways of acquiring our rizq than any other makhluk. For all the other makhluqat, that species has just one way of acquiring its rizq. That's it. An ant has only one way. A specific species of a bird has only one way. Human being, amongst this species, we have probably billions of ways of earning. So, have a skill, a trade, a service that you provide, something in which you use yourself, your body, your skill, and you take a compensation for it. Or kullu bay'in mabrur. Good, honest sales. Engage in tijara, in trade. About the first one, working. Islam has given us some very clear ethics about how we can, what things, what domains we can work in and what domains we cannot work in. There are those which are obviously haram. We don't need to talk about those. And there are those which are obviously halal. Today, the confusion in the ummah is from those ways that appear to have an element of halal and an element of haram. And those ways are increasing. And there are many things that are predominantly halal, but somehow someone throws a wrench in there and all of a sudden there's a complication. Wait a minute, is this okay or not? So ideally, a person should only engage in those activities in which there is absolutely no doubt, no shubha, no type of second guessing that is this 100% okay or not. A person adopts such a profession in which there is no doubt. And in that profession, while providing that service, that work, whatever it is, they're taking wages and salaries that are justified. They're not taking money for work that they haven't done, and so on and so forth. Somebody came to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi and said, I have a salary of 5 dirhams. This was his daily wage. I'm finding that it's not enough for me. What should I do? He said, go to your employer and ask him to reduce your salary to 4 dirhams. So I just told you 5 wasn't enough. And you're telling me to go reduce it to 4. But he listened to the Imam. He went and actually told his employer that from tomorrow I'd like you to decrease my salary. Salary is decreased. After a couple of weeks he comes back and he says, 4 isn't working for me either. He said, decrease your salary to 3 dirhams. This was a time when people actually listened to the shayukh. They actually trusted that this person is not going to tell me something that's going to hurt me. They have 100% confidence and faith in what this man is telling me. Can you imagine someone going and applying for a decrease in salary? Does that even happen anymore? So the gentleman goes and requests for another decrease, and after a couple of weeks, he comes to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah and he says, Alhamdulillah, now my money is sufficient for me. So the people around Imam Abu Hanifa were very puzzled that what was this? We don't understand this formula. He said, actually, the work that this man was doing for his boss was only worth 3 dirhams. The 2 he was taking on top, he didn't really deserve that. That was excess money that he was taking. It was not permissible for him to be taking that. Those 2 wrong dirhams were wiping out the barakah of the remaining 3. When he got rid of those 2, it was pure halal earnings. And of course, there's always khair and barakah in halal. This is how the tarbiyah of the ummah was done. But for us, if there's a way we can overbill someone, we're gonna do it, irrespective of the profession. We're gonna bill and we're gonna charge, and please don't mind me when I say this. I live here in this dunya. I grew up in the Western world. I know what happens in the medical profession. I know what happens with consultants. I know what happens with contractors. I'm from the same planet. You can't say, no, we're all very... It's nice to be pious and everything from the outside, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very much aware of our inner doings. Somebody complained to Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, rahimahullah, a prominent disciple, student of Imam Abu Hanifa. They said, we wish you would have written something on zuhud. We wish you would have written something about, asceticism and denouncing dunya and all of these things. And great ulama, it was their habit that they would write. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah wrote a whole book, Kitab al-Zuhud. Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah wrote a whole book, Kitab al-Zuhud. And just like that, many ayyimma did. They said, we wish you could have written something like this. He said, I did. He says, I did. I wrote a book called Kitabul Kasb, the fiqh of earning. And the purpose was to convey to people the teachings of what types of earnings are halal, what types of earnings are haram. And zuhud does not mean to throw away dunya. Zuhud means to put dunya in its place. When you learn the ethics of earning, you have by default put dunya in its place. You have to live in this dunya. You have to earn some dunya. But when you learn the ethics of earning, you put dunya in its place. You're not making it larger, more important, more intrusive than it's supposed to be. Ya ma'ashara tujjar. The second one, kullu bay'an mabrur, sales, trade, tijara. The Prophet ﷺ warns the merchants, O merchants, Ya ma'ashara tujjar, innakum tub'athuna yawm al-qiyamati fujjaran illa man ittaqa wa barra wa sadaq. Do you know that the tujjar, the merchants, will be raised as fujjar, as sinful people, as criminals in the court of Allah, except for those who feared Allah, those who were dutiful in their commitments, barra, they fulfilled their commitments, wa sadaqa, and they were honest, they gave complete disclosure whenever they engaged in any kind of a deal, in any kind of a sale or a trade. البيعان بالخيار ما لم يتفرقا فإن صدقا وبينا بورك لهما في بيعهما وإن كذبا وكتما محقت بركة بيعهما. This is a hadith of Muslim. That whenever two people engage in a deal of any sort, a transaction, a sale, now one is they're dealing with one another, and concurrent or parallel to that is they're dealing with Allah. It's happening at the same time. If they engage with one another on the grounds of being honest and giving disclosure, being honest and giving disclosure about what they're actually going to offer, what they're actually going to give and deliver, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself puts barakah in that sale, in that trade. But if they come at each other with an attitude of dishonesty, they're being dishonest from the beginning, and secondly, they're concealing instead of disclosing. In Canada, in the cars business, especially used cars business, I had some friends who were car dealers. But then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them tawfiq to become more religious, they left that business right away. So I asked them why. They said, you cannot survive in this business without lying and without concealing. Because they said literally, almost every car that's out there, its kilometers have been turned back. Virtually every car. They said, we know, we're in that business. It has 200,000 kilometers, it's switched back to like 120. Where you go. Faults and flaws, there's a crack in the manifold, you just put some cheap sealant on it and you sell it off as if it's perfect. 2 days later, the guy's manifold cracks, the car falls apart. Hey, I don't know, you should have checked it when you got it. You know very well he cannot detect that fault. You know very well it's a patch up. It's going to break down. So then what happens? So as they're dealing with one another is incorrect, concurrently, simultaneously, they're dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also clashes. Here they're lying and concealing. There Allah says, no barakah in your sale. The guy's counting the profits. Look at this. I made this much money on this deal. I made this much money on this sale. I made this much money on this trade. At the same time, Allah Azza wa Jal is making arrangements to erase and delete and wipe out that money through another channel. This is the guy who had a sack, a flour, he just made a hole in it. He's going to walk around for a little while, feeling the weight of the flour, being very happy that he has a sack of flour. Little does he know it's trickling out. He's filling it in from one side, it's leaking out from the other side. In the form of masa'ib, in the form of all kinds of different calamities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala erases it. In fact, that money becomes a source of grief and stress and problems for that person. So as Muslims, we need to become extremely diligent about the way we are earning and the ethics that we are adopting while we are working. Even in the professional world, even in the corporate world, being a member of the corporate world and making your earnings through that culture, through that society, it does not validate incorrect and unethical practices. There are unethical practices taking place there as well. So this talk is not a talk on the fiqh of earning, because that requires a lot of time. You need a course on that, on the fiqh of earning and the fiqh of spending. Now this is more on some of the general ethics. So the general ethics are to be honest, to be dutiful, to fulfill our commitments, our pledges, to pay up our dues, to abstain from that which is haram. And today, the biggest element of haram is interest. And somehow, some way, we all get tied back into some kind of an interest-based deal. And interest-based earnings manage to creep into our good, pure earnings and corrupt everything. So this is something that has to be looked at very, very carefully. You need to sit down with the ulama, especially with the Muftiyan Karam, those that have specialized in this, and really put our earnings to the test. You know, in Pakistan, there are a group of very wealthy businessmen. People are doing business at a very large scale. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them hidayat. They became more aware of their earnings. And they eliminated whatever elements they could. And then they requested a group of ulama to come and do an audit of their business. Just like your accountant comes and does an audit, an external audit, an internal audit. They asked these muftis to come and do a Sharia audit of their business, that this is the chain of transactions that we go through. We would like you to review every single one of them and let us know if they're at any point in this link, in this chain of links, is there a link that we need to remove, that we need to change? These are people who know that if I earn this wealth in the wrong way, it's going to destroy me, it's going to destroy my family. Very commonly, you have probably heard this example, that Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, when he was made the Khalifa, of course he was from the wealthiest family. He was from the royal family of Banu Umayyah. He had immense amounts of wealth, he and his wife. The day he was made Khalifa, he took all of his personal assets and deposited them in Baytul Mal. And he requested his wife to do the same. So technically speaking, he's impoverished now. He's lost everything. But he spent that short tenure as a Khalifa, he spent it without his wealth. He had so many children. People used to say that we can smell the odor of garlic and onions coming from the mouths of his children, and we know that he has nothing else to feed them but that. This was the state of his children in dunya. And when his time of death came near, he was admonished. You didn't do anything for your kids. You have all these kids. You didn't do anything for them. And look at your cousins. They have built, they have gained, they have empires. He said, look, as far as I know, I have imparted taqwa, fear of Allah, piety into my children. If they hold on to that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to open up ways for them from where they can't imagine. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And if they don't have taqwa, and they have all the wealth in the world, it's only a matter of time before Allah takes it away. It's only a matter of time before it ruins them. So, Abdurrahman ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, who has written a whole book on the Siraat of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and the other mu'arrikhin, Allama Dhahabi rahimahullah, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, anyone who has talked about Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah alayh, they say that he died, he left the world, he had there were only I think 7 or 8 dirhams that he had left over after his burial expenses. Those were distributed amongst his kids. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up the doors of affluence for them. It was just a couple of years. They became wealthy. Now, those people that he used to be compared to, his cousins, the other members of the Banu Umayyah clan, they had left, when they died, they left behind mountains of wealth for their children. But you see, not all of it was gained legitimately. A lot of it was usurped from people. A lot of it was from unfair taxes. A lot of it was just, I'm taking your property, I don't care, get lost. There was dhulm involved. There were all kinds of methods involved in acquiring that were not legitimate. So it was just a couple of years that had passed. All of those families went bankrupt. And the children of Banu Umayyah were holding bowls and begging in front of the masjid, the Jami' of Banu Umayyah in Damascus. It's just a matter of time. Surah Al-Kahf gives us that same lesson. When Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadir, when they went to that town, after starving and hoping for some kind of hospitality, the people didn't offer anything. They were very miserly and stingy. And Al-Khadir sees this wall that's about to topple over. And so right away he goes and starts repairing the wall. يُرِيدُ أَن يَنْقَضَّ. This wall is about to fall. فَأَقَامَ. He fixed it. And Musa alayhi salam said, لَوْ شِئْتَ لَاتَّخَذْتَ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا. If you wanted to do this, if you're out to do humanitarian work and go do repairs for people, you might as well have asked for some compensation. You did work. You did labor. Anyway, at the conclusion of that, when Al-Khadir was explaining to him why he did all of this, he said, remember that wall? فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. It belonged to 2 orphans. That property belonged to 2 orphans. وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا. And beneath it was wealth, money that had been left behind for them by their father. Had that wall toppled, that treasure would have become uncovered. People would have gone and taken it, and that's it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to save and preserve the wealth, that treasure that was left for those boys, so that they could grow up and enjoy this wealth. And one simple reason was given for this. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Their father was pious. So it's the piety of the parents that secures the future of the children. It's not the wealth of the parents that secures the future of the children. It's our piety. It's our diligence. It's our meticulousness in the way we earn and the way we spend. It's our scrupulousness in this regard that is going to save us and save our children. And when it comes to spending, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to spend in moderation. The slaves of Allah are those that when they spend, lam yusrifu, they don't spend more than they need to. Walam yaqturu, they're not niggardly and miserly and stingy when they're spending either. They take the middle path. They take the middle path. In other words, you spend based on what you have, on what you need. Don't spend beyond your means, and don't spend on things that you don't need. And in no case should you just throw away your money on things that are, of course, that are a cause of the displeasure of Allah, on frivolous things, on useless things. Why? Because we have to give an account of what we spend, just like we have to give an account of how we earned it. عن ماله من أين اكتسبه وفيما أنفقه. One of those cardinal questions that we can't move, our feet are going to be locked until we answer, is about our wealth. How did you acquire it and how did you spend it? Where did you acquire this from? What did you spend it on? So just like there is hisab of earning, there is hisab of spending as well. And if a person is diligent in the way they acquire their wealth and in the way they spend their wealth, then that wealth will become a source of them getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and entering into Jannah. And if that wealth is earned from doubtful channels and it is spent incorrectly, then this wealth becomes a source of regret. And you know something very interesting? It's very hard to be obedient to Allah when the wealth is coming from mixed or wrong channels. Because that wealth, once it's consumed by us, it brings its negative effects. This is why we hear that we read in hadith that a person who consumes haram, what happens? The first thing that happens is that his dua is not accepted, his ibadat are not accepted. It's the first thing that happens. And there are two forms of haram. One is a haram substance, consuming it. Meat, it's haram. Somebody consumes pork, it's haram. So ingesting, consuming a haram substance. The other is that the substance itself is halal, but it has been acquired through haram means. He goes and buys perfectly fine, Sharia compliant, hand slaughtered chicken, but he has stolen the money with which he is buying it. So it is halal, but it's not tayyib. The substance is halal, but it's not halal for him because of the way he acquired it. Both things become a source of the rejection of our ibadat and a rejection of our du'as. Sa'ad ibn Waqqas radiyallahu anhu made a request to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, O Prophet of Allah, ud'u Allah an yastajiba da'wati. Make dua to Allah that He makes me mustajabat dua, that whenever I raise my hands, in front of Him, He accepts my dua. I want to become like that. So in response to this, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَطِبْ مَطْعَمَكَ يَا سَعَدْ تُسْتَجَبْ دَعْوَتُكَ. Become extremely diligent and careful in what you are consuming. Your du'as will be accepted. And it was true. You read a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari about how powerful the dua of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was. Oof. He was a force to be reckoned with. Don't mess with this man. Anytime people played with his respect, people accused him wrongfully, he just said, Oh Allah, if what they're saying is wrong, then you take care of them. And they would be taken care of just like that. Where did it come from? It came from being extremely, extremely careful in what he is consuming. One poor man went to a couple of shuyukh in India, and he said, I would like to invite you to my house. It's not going to be anything fancy. Whatever means I have, based on that I will. They said, okay, no problem. They knew him. He was a pious man. Now this man, what he used to do for a living is he used to go and fetch firewood. He used to go out, fetch firewood, bundles of it, sell it, and that's it. So that da'wat was very simple. It was like we say dal roti, that's it. Now, these two shuyukh, who were great shuyukh of that time, they came, sat with him, they had the meal, and they left. About a week later, one of those sheikhs asked the other one, so how did you find that da'wat that we went to last week? He said, I can still feel the nuraniyat of that food inside me. I haven't missed my tahajjud since. This is the barakah, the effect of just pure halal earning. The man was, this is amalur rajuli biyadihi, what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said. You go and work with your hands. That's it. He said, I can still feel the nuraniyat of that food inside me. I haven't missed my tahajjud since. Today, sometimes we talk about this, people say, oh man, this is very mystical. This is all, it's nothing to do with mysticism. It's about to do with nur and dhulma, light and darkness. Light and darkness are not mystical elements. Light is just like, you have light on in this hall. You and I can see. Take off the lights, bar all the windows, it's dark. What happens when it's light and what happens when it's dark? When it's light, you can navigate. I can see where the posts are, where the walls are. I'm not going to bang my head into anything. I'm not going to bump into the next person. Take away the light, what's going to happen? I'm going to be bumping into everything. I'm bang my head on this pillar, on that wall, into this person. I'm not going to be able to identify who I know, who I don't know. The exact same thing. People talk about nur and nur and nur and nur in the heart. It's nothing mystical. It's actual. The nur in the heart enables you to navigate through life and make the right decisions. You're able to see what you need to do, and Allah enables you to do it. And dhulma is, you just make one blunder after another, after another, after another. So let us do an evaluation of our earning and our spending. And when it comes to spending, my recommendation is, don't plan by yourself. Get your families involved. It's all too often that a person says, no, that's it, I'm going to control my expenditure, I'm just going to be like this and like this. The family is not on board, it just causes trouble. Sit down with your family and do some, just like, we sit down and we plan our finances. We're going to need money for this, we're going to need money for that, we need to do this. Sit down and really do a critical assessment of your earnings and of your spendings. And with Allah as your witness, you don't have to go tell people about this. You decide which earnings are there that I need to eliminate, and which expenditures are there that I need to eliminate. You will see Allah will make you so light. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove your burdens. And the problems that wealth brings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rid you of all of those problems. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to spend our lives in a manner that please Him, in a pure way. Spending pure, earning pure, consuming pure. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to depart from this world in such a way that we have also become pure. So I promised you yesterday that if somebody has questions, inshallah we'll take questions. If somebody has written them down, then please bring them. If you haven't written them down, then please write them down. We have some time. We have some time before Aisha. And you're not obliged to ask, by the way. If you haven't, you don't have to. It's no compulsion to ask a question. You got to write it down. मुफ्ती साहब कोई गैर मुनासिब बात तो नहीं करनी है? That Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi has dedicated just to the ethics of earning and spending. It's a worthwhile read. It's very, very worthwhile. In there you'll find a hadith, you'll find athar, you'll find some etiquettes, and you might not be able to implement all of it. He holds you to a very high standard, but at least it'll clarify for you the path of earning and spending. And there are books, mashallah. Ibn Abi Dunya rahimahullah wrote a book. Amongst his rasail is one risala called Islahul Mal, the rectification of wealth. In other words, correcting your earning and spending. This book has recently been translated into English as well, with good footnotes and all of those things, and takhrij of the ahadith. So Islahul Mal, they've called it the restoration of wealth. This is also a very worthwhile read. Kitabul Kasb of Imam Muhammad is also a very important. And Kitabul Amwal of Abu Ubaid rahimahullah. This is one of the first books to be written on this. It's well known, and portions of it have been translated as well. It's important to read on this. And in the absence of this, Fazail Sadaqat. I don't care what people say, these so-called hadith experts and hadith scholars. They don't know the first thing about ahadith and about the compilations of ahadith. Fazail Sadaqat by the Shaykh Muhammad Zakaria rahmatullah alayhi is one of the most complete books on the ethics of earning and spending. And so much targheeb is given for sadaqah and spending in the path of Allah, as well as so many other beautiful things. This book needs to be read in every single house. It needs to be read. And you'll find stories in the lives of the pious people of how diligent they were in respect to dunya and the things of dunya. Fazail Sadaqat, it was written in Urdu, it's been translated into most of the languages of the world. So definitely read this book. Have your women folk and your children also read this book. It's absolutely amazing. So do we have any questions, or shall we close the session?
I think brothers are writing something.
Suggestions how to create such an environment for our infants that we can give them alternate to the addictive activities such as cartoons and smart gadgets, or dumb gadgets, perhaps. It's quite simple. What were our kids doing before this? What did you and I grow up doing? No smartphones, no iPads, no iPods. What were we doing? We're just playing. Let them play. Give them access, and you will have trouble taking it away from them. You give exposure to something and then you deny them, it's almost like to them they see it as a form of punishment. But if you limit or restrict the access from day one, then you will be able to control it right into their adolescence. So, the problem will arise when they see other kids holding these devices, and then they're going to bug you. So what we tell parents to do is to fix a specified amount of screen time. Screen time is any time that your child is engaged with any kind of a gadget, whether it's a phone or an iPod, a tablet, a computer. They have some kind of a screen open in front of them. The maximum allowance for screen time, unless they're doing homework, and for some, according to some people, even including homework, is half an hour a day, not more than that. If you are allowing, I talked about this in some detail yesterday, if you're allowing extensive and prolonged exposure to those waves, it's doing a lot of crazy things to our kids. ADHD is probably one of the lesser problems. But honestly, even my own kids, the day that they, and we limit it, we don't give them access every day. It could be that, okay, fine, this week you can use the tablet for a half an hour on Saturday. You can use it for 15 minutes tomorrow. Like this, just very, very small. Even then I notice that the next day when they read their Quran to me, they're distracted. These things are creating a serious sense of distraction in our children. So limit it and make the child understand from day one that you do not have unrestricted access to this. We control the access, and secondly, we control the content. I cannot stress enough that you need to use parental controls on all your devices. And now there are apps for all your smart gadgets, and there are programs for all your computers that allow you to apply parental controls and also to monitor exactly what was done with that device. From your own device, you can monitor everything that's happening on the devices of your children. So don't be shy and use those things. You know, one father came to me, he called me one day after Fajr. And he was heartbroken. His son, who is of an extremely tender age, was viewing extremely inappropriate content on his phone. He said, I don't believe it. His innocent eyes, what they saw at this age, he said, I can't get it out of my head. So please, use parental controls, be diligent, take responsibility and take accountability for what they're exposed to. And then, aside from that, alternates, everything is an alternate. What happened to going outside and playing, kicking the ball around in your backyard? The kids hardly do that anymore. There's so many activities. The activities are endless, limitless. Make your kids' life fun. Don't make their lives boring. Organized sports, there's nothing wrong with organized sports as long as you're watching them and monitoring the environment that they're playing those sports in. Sometimes they pick up bad habits, but if you're with them, you have the time. Get them involved in organized sports. Get them involved in good, healthy, skill building and health building activities. In relation to israf, how do we correlate differences in wealth? A rich man may afford more expensive things. Is israf relative to wealth, or is it based on absolutes? No, it's always relative to what you have. Islam does not oblige the wealthy man to live the life of an impoverished man. The man of wealth is not obliged to live in a hut. The man who can afford a good car is not obliged to ride a bicycle. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ أَن يُرَى أَثَرُ نِعْمَتِهِ عَلَى عَبْدِهِ. The hadith says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes to see the traces, the effects of His bounties on His slaves. You have wealth, it's there to use. So what is israf for you? It depends on your capacity, on your earnings, and on your capacity to spend. So it is always going to be relative to what you have in your hands and what type of lifestyle you're able to afford. It is not suggested, or it is not stipulated, I should say, in Islam, that every person has to live the same type of lifestyle. The zuhud, the qana'ah of the Sahaba, especially the Khulafa, it was ikhtiyari. That was their very high level of denouncement of dunya. So Umar radiallahu anhu is wearing the shirt with 12 patches, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is living a life of an impoverished person, even though he's Khalifatul Muslimin. This was by choice. They were not obliged to do this. A lot of people are able to work, they're physically fit, but then they take from Centrelink, I guess that's your welfare system. Is it permissible or not? They choose not to work. You know, one of the du'as of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and some Sahaba say he used to make this du'a at the end of every salah. أعوذ بك من العجز والكسل. Ajz is that you're able to do something but you just don't do it, you're lethargic. And kasal means you're just lazy. So ajz and kasal are two things that are very, very shunned in Islam. You have the ability to do something, why aren't you doing it? So remember one thing, this applies to anyone in the world who has access to a welfare-based system. If that welfare is legally permitted for you, based on the scope that has been set for those funds. In other words, you actually do qualify. Then it is halal for you. And if you don't qualify and you're having to lie, then it is haram. It's that simple. If you do qualify, and by the way, don't make judgments also. I've seen that some people, they're very quick to pass judgments about someone who's on welfare. If you don't know the person's intimate personal details, do not pass a judgment. Because it could be that the government has qualified him. Who are you to disqualify him? And similarly, on the other side, we should not be looking for ways to have access to welfare funds. We should be looking for ways to earn. So it's really quite simple. If you're taking it validly in the light in the eyes of the government, and according to the standards that they have set for that, Islamically also it's halal for you. But if you're having to lie and deceive and do all of these things, then Islamically also it is prohibited. That's it. That's all we have for questions. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
5 minutes.